Hey, Fire Mag readers, watchers, and listeners. I'm here today with an awesome dude. I'm here with Ryan Howard Trypp, and he is going to tell you an incredible story. He has already shared the story in several places. Namely, one of those places was Poi Chat, where he got, I think, 275 was the last I counted likes, and I think like 26 shares, which is the holy grail of social media. That's when you know that people really care, when they want to share with their friends the story, because it is, in fact, just that epic. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the beginning. Ryan, can you tell us about how you found the flow arts and what about it, I guess, made you addicted? We all have sort of that thing that makes us pick up a flow prop and not put it down for a good long time.
Yeah, honestly, the first introduction I got was back in 2006 at Coachella. Just saw people spinning glow sticks, kind of old school setting, kind of old school getting into the new school setting, but um, not just was at Daft Punk set that year, and people were blowing my minds with the glow sticks, and it was something, I don't know, being a nerd and having the whole like Jedi kind of mind tricks going on. It was awesome. It's what kind of captivated me.
Mhm. So it sounds like glow sticks were your first flow prop.
Absolutely. Uh,
Okay.
Many bloodied knuckles. Many.
Well, you got to sacrifice for the flow.
Absolutely.
Takes blood, sweat, and tears. So, and that wasn't your last flow prop. Obviously, you transitioned into the last one I know of is poi, but was there any progression through any other flow props?
There's been a few. I've picked up Bugang and I've picked up staff a little bit. Um, a friend got me into Levy Wand for a little while as well. It's tricky, definitely a different mindset, but fun nonetheless. For the most part, just anything. I've honestly kind of taken on the anything can be a flow toy mentality.
Awesome. Fantastic. And I mean, yeah, if you want to talk about Jedi mind tricks, Levy Wand probably definitely qualifies.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Especially if you get that illusion hand going really well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've seen some very impressive stuff happen with that prop. So let's jump into the meat of the matter. You had a very devastating experience. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, back in 2009, I was going through basic training, and unfortunately, coming back from one of our last assignments, the 5-ton truck that we were in, one of the differentials locked up and wound up rolling the vehicle. About me and I think it was 23 other guys, including our drill sergeant, wound up being ejected from the vehicle. Um, Thankfully, I was actually one of the more fortunate and was still able to process through and get through basic training and into the Army, but it definitely put a hamper on my career.
Hmm. Can you tell us the extent of your injuries?
Um,
That's not too difficult.
it's not too difficult. It's I wound up having a fairly bad spinal injury. If anyone's familiar with the C spinal column, I wound up fracturing it, and through the healing process, instead of healing with its natural curve, it healed completely straight, which causes nerve damage throughout my arms and shoulders. Um, to the extent of it, I don't have sensation in my hands. Like I can't feel pain to a certain degree. I mean, obvious severe pain will register, but I can't feel what I'm touching. I can't gripping something.
To this point?
That's still to this point, yes.
Mhm.
Um,
And had you already been spinning when this happened?
oh yeah, been spinning for a couple of years at that point. Was definitely spinning with the old school Augs, if anybody remembers those, the little LED eggs that came from, not sure if Flow Toys had them at the time. It's back, yeah, I think that was Flow Toys carrying them.
Awesome. And 2012 was when you said the accident happened?
No, the accident happened in 2009. 2012 was when I started actually picking poi back up and started actually building my body back up.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because I do have a big question about that. But
Okay, absolutely.
when the injury first happened, what did the doctors tell you? What did they say was your chances of recovery, of full recovery, I should say? And what did
Full recovery was absolutely that there was no idea of full recovery. It was the original idea was that the nerve damage that it caused me would cause me to be in a wheelchair by the time I was 30.
goodness? And how did you feel? I mean, how did you foresee your life moving forward from that point?
It was depressing. I definitely hit a very dark place in my life. Very just, I was not a nice person to the people around me. I wasn't nice to myself. I didn't treat anything well at that point.
Mm-hmm. And was there pain associated with your injuries, or was it mostly just numbness?
There is pain associated. I do still get spasms down my back when I sleep. It's not as severe anymore, but they still happen. Uh, Other than that, it's just random twinges here and there that I can't control.
And when you first got home, having suffered through this, what was your daily life like? How did that change from before you left? Did you have help? Did you need help around the house? Were you unable to do the things that, besides flow, um, that you felt like you should have been able to do, you wanted to be able to do?
There were some things that I was able to do and some things I wasn't able to do. Thankfully, I was able to go back home to my family and they took care of me for the most part, but it definitely affected my relationship in person with my family. Um, Again, I wasn't in the best of mindsets, so I wasn't treating them the best as well.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly understandable. It's a lot to go through. Were they understanding about that?
Yes, definitely, and we've actually had great connections since.
Excellent. Excellent. So there was a period of 3 years between when you sustained this injury and between when you picked up poi again. Is that right? Okay.
This
And
is correct.
what was it about making that decision? Because, as you said, and as we've covered, physical therapy is a painful process.
It's absolutely painful, and that was one of the biggest things. Is the 3 years was me still being in the army and having to follow the army's recommendations on how to go through physical therapy, on how to try to go through PT, um, and it just it didn't work. It wasn't working. It's a much different mindset when you're using weights and exercises and I don't know, it's just not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Take out the fun, it's not as easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, having very little experience with something similar to what you went through, it just sounds like the weights and the kind of training that the military puts you through and the kind that I would imagine trickles down to the physical therapy that they put people through, it just sounds so much harsher than the more choose your own adventure and the more gentle and scalable training that you go through with a float prop.
Oh, absolutely. Um, Absolutely, because the Army, the VA, they have more goals that they have an ideal that they idealize goals versus actually building up to them. Like they want you to be at this point by this time.
Hmm.
It doesn't work that way,
Sounds like the Army.
unfortunately. And unfortunately, yeah.
Well, what was it that made you pick the poi back up? At, having established that it is a very painful process, regardless of how rigorous the training is. Just movement, I imagine, was extremely painful. So, was it your desire to spin poi again? You simply wanted to do it, or did you actually think that it would help you recover from the get go?
Um, Honestly, it kind of happened randomly because I had just gotten back from Fort Carson. I had just PCSed out, gone home, and I was unpacking my things, and I had actually found my original sock poi that I had made in basic training to spin whilst I was in basic, and uh, it was just a couple long green socks with more socks inside of them for weights, and they were light, and I was able to just kind of swing them around a little bit, and I started to notice, well, hey, this doesn't hurt so much.
Mm-hmm. Not as much as picking up a set of weights, I'll bet.
No.
And I know we talked about this briefly before, but did you when you how did you start to see recovery? Was it kind of immediate? Did you start to realize that, hey, I have a little bit more mobility now, I can do things that I couldn't do before? How long did it take to start seeing these effects?
A while, honestly. And I'm not sure if it was longer than it had to have been, but I tried to respect my body a lot more and not push myself too far because unfortunately when you're injured, if you push yourself too far, you can injure yourself worse, you know.
Of course.
Um, so I definitely took my time, and before I started to see really noticeable results, and before I really started to push myself beyond what I knew I was able to do, was about a year and a half.
I mean, yeah, it's a good long time, but if you want to see big results, you have to make a big investment.
No, absolutely.
Mhm. And I think that that's pretty huge. And the 1 and 1.5 years, what exactly was the improvement that you began to see?
The original improvement I began to see was I was able to start to lift my shoulders again. I was able to get them beyond this point. I was actually starting to push them further and further higher. Still can't get the full extension, but hey. Um, I started to notice that my wrists were a lot more limber, and they still pop a lot, but they were a lot more. They can move.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And the sensation in your fingers that you had mentioned before, did that change at all?
that's unfortunately not changed at all.
And since you've started to realize how flow has impacted your, you know, allegedly unrecoverable condition, have you talked to a medical professional? Have you told them the improvements that have happened? Have you been in touch with anyone?
I originally tried to get in touch with the VA in Las Vegas.
And the VA is, again, for the
It's Veterans Affairs.
hmm
They handle veteran retirements, medical procedures, etc., and whatnot. Unfortunately, Las Vegas VA was not interested in it at all. But since then, I've actually moved out to Washington, and I Washington VA is more interested and is actually interested in meeting at least.
That's great. Did the VA in Las Vegas say why they didn't want to talk about it?
No, they
Not,
didn't give any specific reason. If I had to say, I probably caught them at a bad time because it was when the hospitals were moving. They were moving from one side of town to the other.
Okay, I gotcha. And I'm sure skepticism had a bit to do with it as well.
Unfortunately, yes.
When
But
do you have a schedule for when you're going to talk to the VA in Washington?
it's supposed to be set in mid-July.
Excellent. We'd love an update.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it would be great. So since you began to see the improvements, let's see, it's 2016 now, so it's been quite a while. Has your progress slowed down as throughout your poi practice? In terms
Um,
of recovering from your injuries, I mean.
it's definitely slowed to more of, I feel like this is going to be maybe not the peak of where I will be able to get back to, but close to it. Um, I know I've probably lost the ability to do any kind of behind the back work and whatnot just because I can't reach my arms behind my back in that way anymore. I definitely trick. I do weird hybrid stuff, but I know that kind of mobilization is probably not going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, it always sucks to know that you have a limitation, but there are plenty of people that spin that just choose never to do behind the back stuff. It's always a little more irksome when you know that you can't do it even if you wanted to. And I realize that.
Yeah. But hey, I get my badass tosses off. That's what I'm happy about.
Absolutely. And for those of you that haven't seen the video in Poi Chat, it's pretty freaking impressive. And just for
Yep.
somebody that has their full 100% mobility, it's still pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I'm clearly not the only one who thinks that way.
It's been quite an impressive. It's overwhelming still.
Yeah. I mean, your story has really touched a lot of people. That's pretty obvious. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to share with our audience?
Um, Honestly, take it from me. You can do it. Don't tell yourself you can't do it. You can.
And it's okay to pace yourself.
Oh, absolutely. You don't have to rush and try to learn every trick in the book. You don't have to push yourself and hurt yourself. Like unfortunately, I hear so many people like throwing shoulders out or throwing something out by overspinning, and no, you should be listening to your body. Spin with a weight that's comfortable. Spin in a way that is comfortable.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's excellent advice. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. This has really been eye-opening. It's been inspirational. And I mean, what an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I hope that other people that have had similar experience with the flow arts come forward and share their stories as well. I hope this has inspired them. I hope this has inspired the entire community. And thank you again.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Have a great night and good night, Fire Mag readers, watchers, and listeners.
Good night.